That always helps if I unmute myself. Thank you and welcome everybody. My name is Erin Moxon. I'm a project manager at the District of North Vancouver in the engineering department. Now, I've worked at the district for about 4.5 years now, having spent nearly 20 years at the BC Ministry of Transportation. I'm a resident of Deep Cove, having lived here for about 8 years, and I spent 4 years previous to that living up Indian Arm on one of the fire lanes. I have 2 young daughters that are 5 and 8 years old, so I'm very often in the Cove. So in August of last year, the District of North Vancouver installed temporary water-filled barriers to pilot a pedestrian area on Lower Gallant to provide more space for gathering safely during the COVID-19 pandemic. This created space for public seating and for queuing. Following positive feedback that we received from the community about the pedestrian pilot via an online survey we did last fall, in January of this year, the district applied for government funding to improve the outdoor space on Lower Gallant and help create a more livable Deep Cove. You may have heard on the news that we recently received grant funding and it was approved on June 11th. We're reaching out again to the community so you can help us decide how best to use those funds. So what is Livable Deep Cove? Livable Deep Cove proposes to create a protected, shared space on Lower Gallant, offering open, flexible public space with one-way westbound vehicle access. The space focuses on pedestrians and pedestrian safety while still allowing for slow-moving westbound vehicles. The space is flexible so we can tailor the use of the space to the community's needs. Now we need to clarify a couple of terms that I'll be using throughout the presentation, and the two terms are Upper Gallant and Lower Gallant. Gallant Avenue spans 2 blocks of the village core. Upper Gallant refers to the westerly block that's higher up and furthest from the water, and it's circled in orange here. We have Cafe Orso, Blue House, Zucker's, the pharmacy, doctor, dentist are all on Upper Gallant. Lower Gallant refers to the easterly block that is lower down, closest to the water, where the remainder of the businesses are located. It's circled in light blue here. Lower Gallant runs between the 4-way stop at Gallant and Panorama down to the cul-de-sac near the viewpoint. Lower Gallant is also where the the water-filled orange barriers are currently installed. It's also important to clarify that the draft concepts that we'll be showing you tonight assume that traffic patterns in the village core remain the same as they are now, with all traffic entering and exiting the village on Upper Gallant and through the 4-way stop. All concepts also allow for one-way westbound traffic on Lower Gallant past the pedestrian area. Discussions around the possibility of different traffic patterns in the village core will take place later this summer and into the fall when we decide with community input how the Naughton Detour will be used once the storm sewer replacement construction work on Upper Gallant is done. So let's look at the 3 concepts that we've got. So staff and consultants have developed 3 draft design concepts that range from full-scale street redesign down to minimal improvements, and with features such as protected pedestrian spaces for outdoor seating, wider, even sidewalks, and planting pockets. These draft concepts offer creative use of space and street furniture, which can be adapted to suit different community needs throughout the year. So for example, we could have increased seating in the summertime and more parking in the winter. We have a unique opportunity to shape our community's future. These are only concepts that we're showing you, so we need to hear from you, the community, to understand how you'd like Lower Gallant to look and what your priorities are for the space. So let's look at the first draft design concept. This view is looking down and across to the south side of the street as if you were floating above Deep Cove Cultural Center. This shows the full renewal concept with new sidewalks, street pavers from storefront to storefront, new street trees, new lighting, new landscaping, including rain gardens and planting pockets at various points throughout the block, and stormwater management features. It would create a new look for the area. Westbound only traffic continues to be accommodated. What we call flex spaces would be created on either side of Lower Gallant, where we could convert the space into protected pedestrian seating or parking as needed. Continuous level pavers throughout would create a universally accessible area with no curbs, no steps, that prioritizes pedestrians while also permitting slow-moving westbound vehicles. Here's another view looking down Gallant from the four-way stop towards the water. In this rendering, we're showing heavy movable benches that, depending on where they're placed, could create a protected pedestrian space, or they could be moved to the side to allow for parking. At an estimated cost of $3.55 million, grant funding would cover just over 90% of the project cost, with the balance of funding coming from the district's capital budget. Construction would begin early this fall and would take at least 4 months, with disruptions such as excavation for concrete removal, asphalt removal, and placement of new surface materials, as well as other infrastructure. Here's one last view looking east towards the water on the south sidewalk. More space could be created so it wouldn't feel so tight or congested on the sidewalk. The draft design concept, the second draft design concept is a modest renewal that could create year-round accessible public seating areas on one or both sides of Lower Gallant. Pavers would be placed on top of the existing road asphalt to make a new seating area that would be level with the existing sidewalk. Raised planters could be installed at either ends of the block to add greenery and color. Lower Gallant would operate as a westbound only street with parking pockets on either side. It would create a new feel from curb to curb. Again, this is looking down Gallant from the four-way stop towards the ocean. At a moderate cost of $200,000 to $400,000, this concept would require minimal construction and would easily allow for future changes because the existing road surface underneath would remain intact underneath those pavers. Construction would begin early this fall and take about 2 to 3 weeks, and there'd be modest construction-related disruption. Here's a quick look down the sidewalk, down the south sidewalk towards the water. This concept retains the existing trees, so the sidewalk area would still feel a little tight in places. All right, so draft design concept number 3 proposes the most minimal improvements and most resembles the current temporary pedestrian zone. The orange barriers would be removed and replaced with removable bollards that would allow for flexible use of the space. When in place, those bollards would create a protected pedestrian space for seating, much like we have today. And when removed, they would make room for parking. With the bollards in place, Lower Gallant would operate as a westbound only street as it does now, with parking on the north side. Removing the bollards would open Lower Gallant to two-way traffic with parking on both sides, much like it was pre-COVID. This option could be implemented seasonally, for example, with bollards in place during the summer, when there's more pedestrians, and then removed in the winter. This low-cost status quo design concept would likely cost under $100,000. There would be no other changes to the road surface except for the installation of the removable bollards. Installation would likely take place at sometime during fall of this year and take only about 1 to 2 weeks to complete with minimal disruptions. This is one last view looking towards the water. The existing sidewalk, street trees, curb and gutter all remain the same, so that the sidewalk would continue to feel a little bit narrow as it does now. Okay, so there's a series of photos that will follow, and these are what we call precedent images. Precedent images are meant to show you real-life examples of specific design elements that have been installed elsewhere. They're not meant to show you what Deep Cove might look like as a whole, but show you examples of similar techniques that we're proposing for Lower Gallant and that have been used elsewhere in the region. The design elements being proposed aren't new. In fact, we have many examples right here in the district. We have to find the right mix and match of these elements to retain the small village feel that's so important to our community. So in this photo here, which is from Lynn Valley, I'd like to focus on the level pavers throughout. You can see that there's no steps, no curbs, which is inviting for pedestrians to roam freely and signals to vehicles that they need to slow right down. It also shows how bollards can be placed to protect pedestrian space. These level pavers are more in line with what we're suggesting for the full renewal option. This slide shows how a pedestrian prioritized street actually works, with pedestrians moving freely about and buses and other vehicles mixed in but moving at very slow speeds. This is a slide from Marine Drive in the district and shows wide, even sidewalks that provide more room for comfortably walking past storefronts. This example also aligns best with the full renewal option. And for those of you who may have a hard time visualizing what pavers might look like on Lower Gallant, you just need to head down to the cul-de-sac at the bottom of Gallant, where we've already got an example. So what you could do is you could get yourself down to the cul-de-sac and try to picture what those pavers might look like if they were extended all the way up to the four-way stop at Panorama. This is a quick photo that shows what a permanent planting pocket looks like, which provides space for ornamental plants or native species that's built into the ground so that it's at road level instead of planters that would be above ground. This type of planting pocket would be included in the full renewal option. This is a photo from Kamloops. Kamloops installed a number of these quasi-permanent paver-laid areas to expand their sidewalks in response to COVID last summer. Our modest improvement concept number 2 is based on this Kamloops example. In our case, we wouldn't need concrete barriers along the street and would instead have short concrete curbs that would contain the pavers. This image shows temporary above ground planters that could be installed as part of the modest improvement concept number 2. Seating could also be incorporated like is shown in this image. And here we are back on Lower Gallant, looking towards the water on the south side. For the minimal improvement concept number 3, we'd simply remove the orange barriers and replace them with removable bollards so that the seating could remain if needed. Or the bollards could be removed and the roadway reverted back to the pre-COVID configuration with two-way traffic and parking on both sides. It's interesting to look at this photo because you can see how narrow the existing sidewalk is between the permanent patios and the street trees. There's not a lot of space to move about freely. All right, so public consultation for Livable Deep Cove is live and happening now through an online survey that we have. We want to hear from you. We invite you to take the survey, review the 3 draft design concepts. All the renderings that we showed you tonight are also part of the survey, and provide us your feedback on what you think about them. Feedback will be pulled together and presented to council, who will ultimately decide how the grant funding will be used for Lower Gallant. You're absolutely welcome to reach out to me anytime by email or phone if you have any questions about the project that might not be addressed tonight. And we'll share my contact information at the end of the session. And I think we're going to pass it over to Pam.
Hello. Thanks so much, Erin. And welcome for some of those participants who may have joined us after we already sort of did the formal introductions. So you've just been listening to Erin Moxon from the district, and my name is Pam Ryan, and I will be your technical facilitator for today. So just a reminder of the format that we're using for this evening. We'll take the written questions first, and there have been a number that have come through. For those of you who might be wanting to post your written questions, we'd ask if you could please use the question and answer feature. That just makes it easier for us to keep track of the questions in order. And I do note that there are a few people who have used the chat feature for their questions. No problem. We will make sure that we transfer those over. But if you haven't had a chance yet to write in your question, please use the Q&A button. It will open up a new window and then you can type in your question there. And again, for some who may have joined us a little bit later, we'll do the written questions first. We have until 8:30 tonight to take as many questions as we can. Any of the questions that we receive in writing, if we don't get to them tonight, we'll also make sure that we post a written record after when we post the session to the Livable Deep Cove website. Web page, sorry. And so just a reminder, like if you're not comfortable to ask your question verbally, or if you'd like to make sure that we get the question asked, just pop us something in the writing as well. Now, if we get through all of the written questions and there's time for verbal questions, if anyone would like to do that at that time, you can just raise your hand and I will unmute you when it's your turn to speak. So with that, there's a couple of questions that I have for you, Aaron. And the first one is a gentleman who has said he's really pleased to see that parking on Lower Gallant will be removed. But he also would like some assurances that the district doesn't have plans to add parking back in other places, such as like on nearby side streets in order to make up for that parking that's been removed. So the idea that this person has is that, you know, reducing automobiles is key. And I think the concern is that those parking spaces are going to be put elsewhere. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. What I would say is that we haven't looked at like for like parking. You know, if we remove 4 parking spots, do we put them elsewhere? What I can say is I think that will probably come up in the discussion later this fall when we look at the Naughton detour, because depending on the outcome of that discussion, there may be space that could be freed up for some additional parking. But I think we all know there is no magical place where we are going to create a lot of parking spaces in Deep Cove. So I think the quick answer is no, we're not looking at creating parking elsewhere. But we also appreciate that parking pressures are very significant in the Cove and a very large concern for folks. And so I think we do need to look at parking holistically.
Great, thanks, Erin. The next question actually sort of takes it up again another level, and it's just like why actually keep a quote unquote road at all on Lower Gallant? Like perhaps just making it permanently pedestrian. This person suggests that we don't even need to have the bus come down that far and use the turnaround because it could be used. It says here the bus could turn around at its resting place next to the seniors' home, and the underground parking on Gallant. Where you can enter and exit the park. So this question is like, why do we even need traffic on Lower Gallant? And so I'm wondering if you have some feedback on that.
I think right now, you know, it is the terminus for the bus, and the buses have very large turning radiuses. So we do need to turn the bus around. And at this point in time, looking at Livable Deep Cove, recognizing we have grant funding now for work to start this fall, really we need to accommodate those buses. So we need to maintain that westbound only traffic. Again, I would point to the discussion that we're going to have later this fall when we look at different traffic pattern options in the village core. I think that's the time where we have that discussion about different traffic and possibly transit movement as well.
Great, thanks, Erin. I know we do have another few questions about traffic, but I'm going to go through them in the order in which we received them. So this question is a bit of a different take, and this is talking about all 3 of the options. There's a few people who have said, you know, what happens to the remainder of the grant funding if the district goes with concept 2 or concept 3, where it doesn't need all of the grant funding. And then, yeah, so the key thing is what would happen with that extra funding.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. There'll definitely be a conversation with the provincial and federal government because it's a joint grant program from both of them. And we would have that conversation with them and present them with what we are proposing to do. And I think we would just need to wait and see how much money may be quote unquote left over. But at this point, I don't know. We're not at that stage yet to have the conversation with the senior levels of government.
Thanks, Erin. And I just want to note that some folks are starting to raise their hand. That's wonderful. We'll get to the verbal questions once we finish through some of these written questions that have come through. So this one is not so much a question as a comment, but I think it's important to share everything. Just a suggestion that taking autos out of the mix would allow for more greenery and would be safer, especially for children. So thank you very much for that comment. Really appreciate it. I appreciate all comments, by the way, but I just want to say that's not really a question for Erin to answer, so we'll just move on. The next question is, would Lower Gallant ever be completely closed off for events?
Well, right now we couldn't close it because we need to accommodate the buses. So short answer to that is no. You know, it's interesting, this November, we were approached by the Merchants Association. They wanted to have a winter market in the lead up to the holiday season through late November and into December, and with outdoor stalls. And so they were hoping to have that event within the pedestrian zone itself. Now, because of COVID restrictions tightening, ultimately it couldn't happen. But it's just to say that you know, this comment about festival and events, which would be in the shoulder and low season. Nobody needs to see anything more happen in the summertime, but those can still happen with the buses coming through. So no, we don't need to close it down, and there is no opportunity to close it down because the buses do need to turn around. So again, I would defer to the conversation that we're having in the fall when we maybe have an opportunity to look at different traffic patterns while we consider what the future fate of the Naughton detour will be after the Gallant storm sewer construction is complete.
Great, thank you. And next one is just another comment, and the comment is that without a sidewalk, so I think that means with option 3 where everything is all one level, but without a sidewalk, there is really terrific disabled access. So thank you very much for your comment there. The next one, actually, this question has come up a couple of times from different people. And so I see that we may, I'll just combine them because the question is, can there be crossovers? So do I have to pick, like, is it going to only be one option, or is it possible that this person has said, for example, the existing trees should be replaced, and in any case, so maybe that should be happening as part of this plan. Can you have, for example, concept 2 that has pieces of concept 3 or concept 1 in it?
Definitely, yes. There's absolutely, because these are just design concepts, and we kept them at concepts on purpose, and we developed the survey to try and tease out of everybody what your priorities are. So we're going to be looking very closely at how you ranked the different design elements to see what's important for the community. So we may very well end up with a hybrid of concept 1 and concept 2, or a hybrid of 2 and 3. So that's a great question, and we will be looking very closely at trying to drill down to what's important to the community and then respond with a design that tries to meet all of those.
Super, thanks, Erin. And just for the benefit of everyone who might be listening to every word that I've said, that would have been concept 1 is the flat. I think I said concept 3. So I just make sure if you're looking at the things that are important to you, and I think that's another opportunity to share. Part of why we're having this discussion tonight is so that people can get answers to some of their questions. But we really encourage everyone to fill out the survey online, and Erin mentioned that in her presentation, and we'll make sure that we have a closing slide when we get to that part of the session. So thanks very much.
And Pam, just another point that it's really important, and I'd like to put a plug in for the comment boxes that we have throughout the survey. They're very important. If there's something that we haven't touched on that's important to you, put it into those comment boxes. We read every single one, and those are very important as well.
Super, great, thanks. Okay, the next question is draft concept 1 flexible to have two-way traffic the same way that concept 3 is, or no?
Let me think about that. I would say no. And the reason I say that is because we'll be moving and shifting the street trees to the point that ultimately we need to maintain fire access. So fire trucks need a certain width to be able to come in safely, park, do what they need to do. So there's lots of space around them. So the full renewal concept number 1 allows enough space for that to happen, but wouldn't quite be wide enough for two-way traffic. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and if anyone feels like we haven't, effectively answered the question, by all means, let us know. You can always ask another question. I do want to say that we have quite a few questions here. So anyway, by the way, Erin, I think you did answer the question, but just make sure that it was clear to the person who asked it. We do have quite a few questions, so I want to quickly go through, and we might combine some because as I mentioned before, there's some folks who have the same question. So again, just another question up, I'm not sure which one I should, do I vote for something? And I think that Erin's already shared, like, it's really important that you share information about what's important to you, because the district may end up with some hybrid options. Next one is a question about the Naughton. So here, I'll just read the whole question to make sure I'm asking it correctly. You said that decisions would be made on how the Upper Naughton Detour Road will be used after the storm drain project is complete, and that this might determine or will determine traffic patterns in the new Livable Deep Cove. Can you just speak a little bit more about that, Erin? Keeping in mind that the folks have said that the Naughton always thought it would be a temporary detour. So let's be clear on kind of what is Livable Deep Cove and what is happening with the Naughton detour.
Yeah, so yeah, we've had a couple of community meetings about the Naughton detour and how it relates to the Gallant storm sewer project. And right now we have a separate public engagement still open, the ideas board, where we're gathering input from the community on how they think the Naughton detour should be used once the storm sewer project is done. We started out that ideas board with 3 ideas: fully remove and revegetate, convert it into a pedestrian and cycling link, or leave it as a vehicle link. So, and there's been, I haven't checked in a while, but I think we're upwards around 12 ideas. So when I talked about traffic patterns, for example, people have asked about fully closing Lower Gallant. So the only way we could fully close Lower Gallant is if the Naughton detour were a permanent link to allow for traffic, and most importantly, the bus to loop in and out of the Cove. And so that's why to the full flexible use of the space on Lower Gallant is loosely tied to that. But again, all of these concepts that we're showing you tonight do allow for and provide for that one-way westbound traffic flow.
Thanks, Erin. This is a very specific question about something from last year, so it may be that we don't have an answer tonight, but I'll just ask in case we do. How many responses did the district get to last year's survey about the Lower Gallant initiative, and how many responses do we expect to receive in this survey? So I don't know if you know that.
As far as, so we received, I want to say, I'm going to say about 350, and I could be off by a couple of dozen last fall. And this year we've already received, I don't know what the latest count is. I believe we're just over 600. So we've had excellent response to the survey right now, which is fantastic. And it just provides us a stronger, better picture of what the community wants. So it's great.
Thanks, Erin. I just want to acknowledge someone has suggested here it would be a shame if we didn't get a chance to use the whole grant. So that's thank you for your comment there. The next comment again is about some of the changes that were made last year as a result of COVID. So those changes on Lower Gallant were in response to COVID and the need for more pedestrian space. As we get through COVID, the question is, are we still going to need that pedestrian space? Every food business in Deep Cove has a patio, which reduces sidewalk space. And so just a question of why is the district sort of making the table space a preference over pedestrian space?
So yes, it was in response to COVID. And in fact, the grant funding relates to COVID response to make public spaces that allow for and provide for social distancing and safe gathering during a pandemic. Let's hope to goodness this is the only pandemic any of us are ever going to experience. But I guess really what we received such strong feedback during the last fall survey, plus anecdotally talking with the community, that we feel that people really do enjoy that public space down on Lower Gallant and want to see it made permanent in some shape or form. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, hey folks, we've heard you. We understand that people enjoy this space. They want to see some permanent improvements. And so here we're trying to figure out what do you feel, what do you believe permanent means? And that's why it's important for us to drill down to what's a priority for you and what would you like to see on Lower Gallant.
So on that front, we have a number of people who are asking questions and sharing their opinions around parking. And so I'm just going to share three different sort of points of view so that everyone who's here tonight gets an understanding of kind of who's participating in the fact that people have differing views. And then Aaron, maybe you could just talk about traffic generally and how you think about those things as a district that needs to make sure that people can move around. So first one is, why do all of the options include temporary allowances for parking in the winter? Maybe we should have no parking at all. Why parking in the winter and not in the summer? And the next comment is, traffic flow and lack of car parking is negatively affecting the Cove. So we need to, we need to be able to provide safe cycling paths, connecting places like Maplewood to Deep Cove, giving people alternate opportunities to access Deep Cove. And then another person has said, I really appreciate that there is this focus on Lower Gallant, but parking in Deep Cove overall is a big problem. And that limited parking is creating things like fighting over parking spaces and unsafe traffic situations. So I think, you can see that there's a number of differing views, and just sort of how do you consider all of those things as you're developing plans?
So just a couple of comments to that. Related to the cycling comment, we do have a bicycle master plan, and the cycling facilities east of Seymour are on our 5-year radar to try and make improvements to those, because it's true, we've got a bike valet that in the park this summer, and some have said, well, it's challenging to get to Deep Cove. So we acknowledge that, and we're working on that to try and improve cycling connections, because ultimately we've got to get people out of their cars. So we need to get them on their bikes, in transit, shared vehicles, to try and reduce the volume of traffic coming into the Cove. So other transportation demand management tools and options, the district's piloting paid parking in Lynn Canyon Park this summer. So depending on how that pilot goes, maybe that's something that we could look at in Deep Cove. So we can start, we've got some more tools in our toolbox, but parking is a big challenge, and there's no silver bullet that's going to make all the issues go away. So we need to look at some of these other transportation demand management tools that we have, and maybe there's some different ways that we can look at parking. Definitely not something we can do in the short term this summer while we have the construction project going on, but maybe it's something that we should look at as we work on Livable Deep Cove.
Thanks, Aaron. And just on that sort of access and parking, someone else has pointed out that delivery trucks for merchants really need that idea of close access. So I imagine that's one of the things that's looked at as well. We do have a number of people who are, again, asking things like, well, why are these options, are there only 3 options? And, one seems like a lot of money, the other one seems like almost no money. So are those the only things that can be done? And I think you've already mentioned that, it may be that we end up with some kind of hybrid as well. So I want to acknowledge that people are asking those questions, but maybe just a reminder again about kind of what happens from here, and how would you make a decision about what to do?
Well, we'll be taking all of the input and looking very closely at the results of the survey and what you folks tell us. And so that's why it's so important to share your thoughts in the comment boxes. Try not to just, click and rank and be done. The more time you spend on that survey, the better for us. So we'll take that feedback, we'll pull it all together, and then we'll go to council and have a discussion with them about what the survey shows the community would like on Lower Gallant. And at that point, we'll have a pretty good idea of what that project will look like. And then very quickly, we need to jump into the design phase, because part of the grant funding is to get that project rolling this fall. So we've got a pretty tight timeline, but it's so important for us to have this public engagement first so we get it right.
Thanks, Erin. Another question has come up around that concept of events and the suggestion that, you know, a lot of tourists and people come to visit Deep Cove in the summer months, and that it's the winter months and the off season that sort of the residents get a break from the hustle and bustle of other people visiting. So just wondering, how is the district going to ask the community about the concept of events if that happens in the future?
Well, so it won't be from us. It will be from the Merchants Association. It might come from the Community Association. It will come externally to us to say, hey, we would like to have an event of some sort this time of year on Lower Galant. So it's not us creating events. And I go back to that example of the Merchants Association coming to us and talking about a winter market. And that's how I envision it would come to be. So really it would be, I would think, a community-driven request.
Thanks, Erin. And I know we have a couple of people who've asked again about, well, why not do Upper and Lower Galant all at the same time? Why not extend that pedestrian zone? I know you comment on it, but maybe just a reminder again about why those two are different and why you're only looking at the one block now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lower Galant and Upper Galant act very differently right now from a traffic perspective. Having said that, we've got this very large storm sewer project going right down the middle of Upper Galant. So we have an opportunity actually to look at Upper Galant if that's something the community wants. So there is a question in the survey about Upper Galant and what people's thoughts are on that. And again, if our questions weren't enough, please use the comment boxes. But we are going to be removing the sidewalk on the north side of Upper Galant. It's very uneven. It's heaved because of the street trees. So we'll be replacing the sidewalk, new street trees. So we have an opportunity to tweak the design for that. It's not going to be installed till the fall. So we have an opportunity to make Upper and Lower Galant look very similar. And as you know, if you've been out there recently, BC Hydro had to rip up most of the south sidewalk as well. So we really do have an opportunity to make both Upper and Lower Galant look more seamless.
Great, thanks, Erin. This is a question actually about bus service, so I'm not sure if it's something that you can answer, but can we have more regular bus service, but with a smaller shuttle bus like the ones that services Parkgate and Indian River? And that would be able to use sort of a more limited space.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I do know a little bit about that because we did talk to Coast Mountain Bus and TransLink during the planning phases of the storm sewer project. The challenge is that we've got, there's a couple of high schools between Deep Cove and Phibbs Exchange. And so those they need the big buses to bring to stuff them full of students. So it's not practical for them. They would actually have to have a transfer point if they were to have a community shuttle at our end. They would have to then transition to the larger full buses partway to Phibbs. So that's probably just half the answer. And if that's something that you're very passionate about and really want to dive into more details, TransLink and Coast Mountain Bus would probably the best folks to talk to. Of course, we can have those conversations with them as well, but that was their general response to us.
Great, thanks, Erin. The next question is actually about the new trees that might be included in some of these options. And the comment was just, there has been some trees removed as a result of the Naughton work that was required for the sewer replacement. What types of trees would be replanted? Will they be mature, large, healthy trees that might help to, counteract some of the that had to be lost?
Well, there was a question in the survey about that, asking folks what they thought. Should we just at all costs keep the existing trees as is, recognizing they're not in great health? Or do we remove and replace with the standard size new tree, which is not very large, Or do we spend more money and put in more mature trees? So there is, we can spend a bit more money to get slightly larger trees. There's always a risk they might not survive though. So we can't go too big, but that is definitely something that I think we would look at, because you're right, there's been a lot of trees that have been removed in the area. And greenery is really lovely.
Thanks, Erin. And just if I could, reminder to folks, if you can, please use the Q&A button instead of the chat. I'm trying to make sure that we're going through the questions in order, and it's harder for me if I have to look at two. If you need to keep using that because you can't, your Q&A button function isn't working, by all means, that's okay. I just want to acknowledge that it's a little bit easier for me if folks use the Q&A. And thank you very much for your participation. Okay, the question came up again around, is it necessary to make a decision about Lower Gallant before the discussion of Naughton happens? Because I think some folks are like, well, that might make a difference in terms of whether I like it or not. So I think, again, I know it's come up, but maybe if you could just clarify the difference between the two projects and why this timing is now.
Yeah, that's a good question. And the grant funding really is tied to a very tight timeline. And like I said, the construction has to start this fall. And that's probably right when we'll be talking about the, maybe late summer, early fall is when we'll be talking about the Naughton Detour. So unfortunately, we won't have the answer on the fate of the Naughton Detour until we're well along the way of the Livable Deep Cove project. But I think the beauty of any of the options of Livable Deep Cove is if there were a permanent Naughton link, it just adds to the flexibility of that space on Lower Gallant. And I think the answer is as simple as that, really. The Naughton link is not needed for any of these Livable Deep Cove concepts whatsoever. If the Naughton link happens to exist, it just increases our flexibility of that space.
We definitely have lots of people who are thinking and have opinions about sort of one-way, two-way, traffic, no traffic. And so I just want to acknowledge that there's all of those comments are out there. And, some have said, why are we even including one-way traffic? Why don't we just have nothing? And then another person has said, it's important to remember that we're talking about both destinations that maybe people could walk to, but also origins. And so that idea of some people who are, living or working in that area who may need the accessibility. And so one person suggested, if we couldn't have transit there, and we have someone who is in need of transit assistance because they don't have another opportunity, just those are all things I think that the district has to consider. And there's quite a few comments on that. So I just want to acknowledge all of them, say that there is a real range and that we may not be able to say them all in the session tonight because there still are quite a few questions. So thank you everyone for that. I assure you that all of the written comments will be documented and recorded. The next question is, why does there have to be tables and chairs outside the businesses? Visitors could come to have a picnic in the park and not necessarily a picnic in the street. So could tables and chairs be put into the park areas where there is space instead of on the sidewalk areas?
Yeah, it's a fair comment, and I think that's part of the survey is we need to hear what you think and what your priorities are, and if you feel that public seating isn't a priority on Lower Gallant, then please share that through the survey. Right now, during COVID, that seating was very important to the businesses because, as you're probably well aware, all those, or most of the businesses, most all are very small. And so they couldn't accommodate hardly any, if any, indoor seating. And so that outdoor seating was their lifeline in a way to allow their customers somewhere to sit down once they made a purchase.
Great, thanks, Erin. And I just want to flag that we are at 8:20. We have 10 minutes left in our session. We still have quite a few questions. Some of them are similar to things we've already covered. I'm just going to go quickly through them. Not all of them, but I just want to acknowledge if you have a question and you're waiting to ask it verbally, we may not have time. So I just want to encourage everyone to get their questions out so that we can at least get the responses to you in a timely manner. There are some questions about the number of parking spots that option one, or the concept one, that sort of full build out would provide. And I think it's flexible, but do you know, Erin, how many it could accommodate?
I don't know the exact number, but that's the beauty of it, is it's flexible. So if the community tells us that parking is fairly important, but so is public seating, then maybe we'll do this. We'll divide the space in half seating, half parking. Or if parking is less important, it would be less parking. So we can tailor that based on what we hear from you. So again, that's why you've got to fill out the survey and tell us what your priorities are, and to give us a sense for, we want to try and hit it right.
Great. Thanks, Erin. Then someone else has asked, will there be provisions for, parking or access for people with physical disabilities to be able to continue to get to Lower Gallant?
Right now, I believe we have one accessible parking space. We're also looking to provide some spaces to help out with temporarily during the construction project, to help out with customers of the health services on Upper Gallant. But very good question, or I think it is a good question and a good comment. And so if there's a feeling we don't have enough accessible parking on Gallant, please let us know through the survey.
Great, thanks, Erin. The next question we have is, why is the district creating more attractions in the Cove when there's nowhere to park?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's a concern I've heard. I like to think of the full renewal option as just that. It's a renewal. I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I think the last time Lower Gallant was improved was, I'm going to say in the 80s, mid-late 80s. It could be wrong by a decade or so. So this is an opportunity for us to renew it. I don't think people want to make it an attraction. I think my thought is people want to make it livable so that it's a place that we can share. The visitors aren't going away. We probably don't need more visitors, but I think we need to find a way to share the space more comfortably with the visitors.
Great, thanks, Erin. The next question is actually about the process and what happens next. So how will the results of this engagement, the online and the meeting that we're having today, be transparently shared with the community?
That's a good question. From what I understand, we will gather all of the results together from the survey. They will be included in a report, which I am going to speculate will be, I would assume it would be public, particularly when we go to council, because it will be something that we will share with council. The results will go to council. And of course, that would be in a public meeting. So the agenda package is free for everybody to look at. And I think we'll make that well known. I think it's always neat when you do one of these surveys to know what your neighbors feel and what others feel.
Yeah, and we're certainly getting a wide range of comments and ideas tonight. So that's a good example. The next question, we may not actually be able to answer it, but I think people are interested is, could you maintain the Naughton connector as only a temporary connector? For example, like with bollards, as you described tonight, and then, with the need in the off season, you could close Gallant for community events, like Deep Cove, it says PPP parades, community celebrations and that, but then keep it open at other times.
It's an interesting idea. And it's worth posting that on the ideas board that we have available. I think that's a really neat idea, but really we need that becomes part of the discussion that we'll be having later this summer into the fall. But please, if you have any ideas that aren't on that ideas board yet, please go onto that ideas board. You can find that at dnv.org/Gallant construction. So go visit that site if you haven't already. It's got lots of some information about the project, the construction project. It will also give you a link to that ideas board.
Great, thanks. I'm just going to try and make sure that we're addressing all of the new questions that haven't been addressed, but I just want to acknowledge again, lots of comments around, preference for options, preference for, suggestions around parking and traffic circulation. So thank you everyone for sharing those. We'll make sure that they get recorded. Then the next question is, when will the recommendation coming out of this engagement be discussed or shared with council? And, so what other sort of opportunity would there be for people to hear that discussion at council?
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping soon. Council does go on break for the summer, so we're doing our best to go back to council before their break. So that's the plan, so that we can make a decision quickly, because we do need to make a decision quickly so that we can be ready for construction in the fall. These are only concepts, so they have to be scoped out, and a detailed design needs to be done, which does take time.
Great, thanks. And I had a couple of people who are asking, because they joined later, how they can participate in the survey. So I'm just going to ask if we can advance that slide so people can see it as they're going, because I know we only have 3 minutes left. So there you go, dnv.org, livable-deep-cove. We also have, folks asking just, where can they participate or post on the Naughton Ideas board? Because someone was concerned that either it had closed or that it is closing soon.
It is closing soon, and it would be dnv.org/Gallant Construction.
Great, thanks. And then the next question I see here that hasn't come up yet is, are these tables and chairs open to everyone, or would they be for specific businesses, sort of like reserved seating?
Yeah, good question. We'd be interested in hearing what people think about that question. Last summer, when we first installed the temporary pedestrian pilot, all of the picnic tables were public. We, the district, put them out there. This year, we're trying something a little bit different, where some of the businesses have chosen to seek permits to put out some of their own tables that would be just for their customers, but we do still have all of our picnic tables there as well. So we have a combination of public and private. So I would actually love to hear what people think, what their preferences are. So if you haven't done the survey yet, please add that in, or feel free. My email's up now. I would really like some feedback on that.
I think you'll be getting lots of feedback. We've got a lot of people who are really participating tonight. So thanks again. We are close to time, but I also understand that Sari McCall and Arian Baxter from the Deep Cove Community Association are with us tonight. And I think that either both or one of them, we're just going to say a few comments. So perhaps I could just ask, is the one of you that is going to talk, and if it's both of you, maybe just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Thank you, Arian. I will. Did it work? You should be able to speak now. Okay, Arian, there you go.
Hi, I'm Arian Baxter. I'm a returned 25-year resident of Deep Cove, and also a business owner in Deep Cove with Deep Cove Canoe and Kayak and Deep Cove Collective. So I think Sari's going to speak as well. And Sari's again, a long-term resident in Deep Cove. And I was just speaking from, that mixed point of view about how personally I've been using the way the orange dividers have been using the Cove is I've happily been enjoying the tables in the Cove and eating at the restaurants with their expanded space. And then as a resident, it took me a little bit to get used to the one-way traffic, but I've gotten used to it. And I quite appreciate how it has slowed down the movement in the Cove and kind of clarified the four-way corner. And so I'm in support of a version of this project, depending on what the community comes back with on what they feel is necessary. I think some of the comments that have come up about integrating lower and upper Gallant is worthwhile, and seeing the options. I think an amalgamated option for me, the options 2 and 3 really focus on one side of that street, and no offense, but personally my business is on the other side of the street, so I kind of want the options to be kind of an overall option.
Great, thanks, Ariane. And Sari,
Not
I
sure what
know
else to
we're-
add, and I think Sari is there as a long-term resident to speak.
Sure. Sari, you should be able to speak now.
Hi. Okay, so Ariane and I are both on the Deep Cove Community Association Board, and we are also on the Parking and Traffic Committee. And I did ask the residents in the heart of Deep Cove, which is where I live, other feelings on the Livable Deep Cove project. Most of it was extremely positive, very excited about the beauty of beautifying the Cove, and a lot of people felt like it's long overdue. But a lot of people also said that that part is great, but now we already have this parking nightmare, and is there going to be a bigger parking nightmare? So everything seemed to go back to parking, not enough resident parking. Basically, overall, I got a very positive feeling about it, and a lot of us are using the street and are appreciating the extra tables on the street. The one way for us has been great in our building because it has slowed the traffic down on Banbury, which we already get the buses there, so it's nice to have less traffic along that road, and the one way has been really supported, I believe, for most of us in the heart of Deep Cove. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Sari. Thank you both. And thank everyone here for participating and asking your questions and sharing your comments tonight. I hope that the webinar was a positive experience and that perhaps you got some new information that maybe you didn't have. Please do visit the link on the screen that you can see here to complete the survey if you have not already done so. And as Erin already mentioned, we welcome questions or comments at any time. So please feel free to contact Erin directly, also at the email on the screen. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate your time. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And this concludes our session.